I hope you're having a good Saturday. Welcome to The Truth. I'm John Gordon. The world has become a dangerous place. Mitch McConnell, in fact, said that it is the most dangerous time that he's witnessed since the beginning of World War II. Now, we've been celebrating Trump's tariffs with the potential of funding our Treasury by $600 billion a year. The tariffs are having an effect. But one of the effects may be a unintended consequence of pushing our allies, or I'm sorry, our adversaries closer together. Take, for instance, this past week, China had its annual military parade celebrating its 80th anniversary since the end of the war. And we see that Russia, China, both presidents together welcoming the head of India, the head of India's government. That did not sit well with Donald Trump. He said that it appeared to be a conspiracy that was formed between Russia, China, and India. You may as well, Mr. President, include the other BRICS countries like Turkey and Iran, Brazil, South Africa. The tariffs, while on the one hand are beneficial for our country and its economy, as I said, we do run the risk of encouraging a closer relationship among our enemies. India has been viewed as an ally of the United States until very recently. I think they're playing hardball back against Trump's hardball. So it's a pretty risky proposition that Trump is engaging in. He's playing hardball with people that are accustomed to hardball, and they're pushing back. 26 countries attended China's military parade, 26 major countries, followed by a lot of smaller countries like Taiwan, who sent a delegation of 6 people to the military parade. Not much really of significance came out of uh, the meetings that were held in China, uh, including our adversaries. The most significant news clip that I've seen is the hot mic exchange between Putin and Xi discussing the longevity of mankind and how they believe that it might be possible to achieve 150 years on Earth with the advent of organ transplants. Now, I don't know what you think. I'm not sure I want to stay here 150 years. That would mean that I'm actually just halfway through my life. I did take one of those internet uh, questionnaires the other day. You can go on the internet and just surf for a life expectancy exam. Mine came back saying that I was going to live to 94. I know that will come as a great disappointment to some of my heirs, but look on the bright side, it'll just give me that much more time to accumulate some wealth that I can leave behind. But in the meantime, I suggest that you work as hard as you can to accumulate your own wealth so that you won't need mine. Um, and we can enjoy a long 20 years of additional familiarity and enjoyment with each other, just like I did this week in Los Angeles with my new grandson, who is now 2 weeks old. And we were also able to enjoy our 2-year-old granddaughter and our son and his wife, John and Darcy. We have had a great time being in Los Angeles this week. And we continue to enjoy their company and having just some really good quality family time together. Well, Epstein is a story that just won't go away. Some of Epstein's victims said, "Well, if the government won't give you the list, we will." That caused Marjorie Taylor Greene and Anna Paulina Luna to say that they would join in and help release the names. I continue to maintain that the names is a smokescreen. I don't think that the American people are as focused on the names as they are the sponsors of Epstein's honeypots. That's what I want to know. Who was behind this? Speculation is rampant that it was the CIA. Others say it's Mossad. Some say that British intelligence was also involved. In fact, we had a great interview just this week with an individual who professes to have known many people in MI6 in Great Britain. He thinks that Epstein is just a continuation of the Russia hoax, all of which is designed by our adversaries and our allies alike to disrupt Trump's administration. Personally, as I've said before, I'm not as concerned about the names. I am concerned about the unintended consequences of ruining people's reputations who may have only flown on Epstein's plane but did not visit Epstein Island. Those people that did not have sex with minors but are somehow linked just because they knew Epstein. Epstein knew a lot of people. A lot of people flew on his plane. A lot of people probably had dinner at his house in New York and Palm Beach that had no contact with any underage women, yet their names might be linked to Epstein and their reputations, their families, their marriages wrecked because of false allegations. So I think it's very dangerous to start looking at the names of people. I think you run the risk of trashing innocent people. But I do care about the sponsors of Epstein and his enterprise. Those are the people I really want to identify, to be outed and identified. I do think it's going to lead directly back to the deep state. I do think we're going to find, I mean, you think about it, the behavior is aberrant, but all the hundreds of hours of videotapes that now have mysteriously disappeared showing powerful people in compromised positions. Doesn't that sound strange to you? Isn't that bizarre? I mean, who would do that? I think that probably only our own government would do that, and maybe our foreign intelligence allies would do that so that they could then control these people. I think that's why the American people want to know the truth. And my suspicion is that's why Trump is reluctant to let the news out, because it may just be too much for the American people to be able to stomach and accept. And it could risk the stability of our own nation. Well, I say let the chips fall where they may. The American people are resilient. We're tough. We love our country. We love our flag. We're not going to, we might break some eggs along the way to making our omelet, but we're not going to destroy anything. We don't want anarchy or rebellion. We just want truth and accountability. I think that's fair. I would think actually that Trump would be at the head of the line because does have the potential to help in his crusade to dismantle the deep state. And I think that that is the heart of the question. I'm repeating myself, but I do think that is the seminal point of all of this. And I also think that Trump does not want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think that he does recognize that having a effective intelligence community is necessary to our national defense and our national interest. I would agree with that. But I also believe that there are rogue actors who operate outside the margins, who operate outside the law. And I think that's what Epstein represented. And that's why I'm staying on the hunt. I want truth. I want the people that have engaged in murder, assassinations, destabilizing foreign governments without authority from our own. Those are the people that need to be outed and held accountable. I think Epstein is the one path to get to that. I do think that Donald Trump is committed to reforming our federal government. I think Russia, Russia, Russia was chapter one of what will be a trilogy. I think that's the first story to break. I think the 2020 elections will be the second story to break. I've said the last couple of weeks that I think the Supreme Court of Georgia is going to rule to affirm the conflicts of interest that Fani Willis had in prosecuting the Trump 19. I think they will affirm the Court of Appeals in its decision to remove her from the case. I've encouraged that the Supreme Court go one step further and remove her from the Georgia bar because what she did was egregious. I think she used taxpayer dollars to go on trips with her lover, who she appointed as a special prosecutor, and then paid him $750,000 with taxpayer money. That cannot be allowed to stand. And the judge in that case didn't have the guts to hold her accountable. He used to work for Fani Willis, and so he said, okay, well, the Court of Appeals, you can go to the Court of Appeals with an interlocutory case and they can overrule me, which they did. Now, Fani Willis appealed to the Supreme Court. That's where it's sitting. And I think a lot of commentators are curious and interested in the fact that they have not issued a ruling, which we all felt like would be forthcoming probably in July. We're now into September. The Supreme Court is still silent. What's taking you so long? Go ahead and make your ruling. Better yet, go ahead and disbar Fani Willis in the process. You hold the keys to the vault. You are able to certify members of the bar. You're also able to disqualify members of the bar. If we're ever going to disqualify anybody, I think Fani Willis would be the start because what she did was egregious. She should not be allowed to have operated in the way that she did. I think Judge McBurney needs to get off his butt and rule in the 2020 case that sits in his court. He's just sitting on the case. It's still pending. And we'd also like to see the 2020 absentee ballots that are locked in the English Street warehouse. There's a court order ruling that those ballots be unsealed and allow the petitioners in the case of Jefferson Satir against the Fulton Board of Elections, where Judge Brian Amaro ruled the ballots be unsealed and allow the petitioners to inspect them. That ruling stands. It's in McBurney's court. Judge, do your job. Give us the time, place, and manner of inspection, and let's get it on. I think that the reluctance is it's going to show that 2020 was stolen in Georgia, and I think it's going to lead straight back to the deep state, leading me to question, why was Bill Barr coaching Fani Willis? It smells bad. It stinks. I wonder if the Supreme Court is somehow mired in that quandary, in that quagmire of how to unravel this. Just do the job. Let the chips fall where they may. Donald Trump is not backing down. He's sending the National Guard into Chicago. It's way overdue. Pritzker and the mayor of Chicago object. They won't do their job, but they don't want Trump to do his job. He's the chief law enforcement officer in the nation, and he's determined to stop the killing in Chicago, where just last week, 27 people were shot and scores were murdered. The killing has got to stop. And what people are not talking about is that the biggest victims of this crime are minority communities. Black on black crime represents 90% of the shootings in Chicago. Call it for what it is. and help save young black men from the savage brutality of the shootings that are occurring on the streets of Chicago every day, and especially over the weekends. It's time for it to end. It's inhumane. It's un-American. We don't allow that to happen in our country. And these democratically controlled country or sorry, democratically controlled cities that allow lawlessness, and the governor of Illinois, Pritzker, he's becoming aligned with the criminals because evidently he's not willing to step in. He could call the National Guard in. Why doesn't he call the National Guard in to stop the brutality and the killings? But yet he doesn't want Trump to come. So what conclusion can you draw other than he's cozying up to the criminals? The Democratic Party is becoming the party of lawlessness as they oppose Trump in helping to curb crime like he did in Washington, where violent crime has all but been eliminated. Even the mayor of Washington thanked Trump for his work. So these other blue cities that have created a permissiveness for violent crime need to get with the program, and they need to start cracking down on crime in their cities. The Department of War is now a reality. Trump signed an executive order and Hegseth implemented it. I'm not sure how you feel about the Defense Department becoming the Department of War. Personally, I'm not too keen on it. It sounds provocational to me rather than being the president of peace. I guess on the other hand, he is acknowledging what the department really is. They are not peacekeepers. They are a arsenal. We have strength, we have might, and I think Trump is acknowledging perhaps what it truly is. It is a war department. But still, I don't like the sound. I don't like the narrative. I don't like the message that it sends out. Trump wants a message of strength. I would prefer a message of peace. A lot of people agree, but I didn't like the Gulf of America either. But Trump really doesn't care what I think. So we got the Gulf of America and we got the Department of War. Well, Jerome Powell seems to be getting his way. He's held interest rates steady. He wants to curb inflation. Of course, the unintended consequence, the undesired consequence, not the unintended consequence, because high interest rates de facto mean a cooling of the economy, de facto meaning increases in unemployment. That's what we got in July, where unemployment ticked up 0.1% to 4.3%. I think the die is cast. September will result in a rate reduction, rate relief, if you will. The question now is, will it be a quarter or will it be a half? Powell surprised us before the November election with a 0.5 point reduction in interest rates. Maybe he will have a September surprise. I wouldn't think that he would or that the Fed would, were it not for the fact that the unemployment rate ticking up, I think, is an alarm is being sounded. If they wait too much later, they could wait too late and truly send us into a I hesitate to use the word recession. I don't think it will be a recession, but it will be a downturn. And everything else in the economy is going so well. Our national economy is on fire. The amount of investment, you've heard me talk about it, you've heard Trump talk about it, $15 trillion is being promised. Countries are just agreeing to invest in tools, plant, and equipment in the United States like we've never seen before as Trump rebuilds our manufacturing sector. It is unprecedented. It is exciting. Now we need all the cylinders firing at once. We got the big, beautiful bill passed. If we can, and we got tariffs fueling our treasury. Tax revenues are bound to go up with the rising tide and the increase in revenues. We truly are at the forefront of an age of abundance. Speaking of which, Elon Musk unveiled the his uh, business plan part 4. We've gone through part 1, 2, and 3. Now he has promised sustainable abundance, not only for the United States, but for the people of the globe. And I think that the U.S. is leading the way in that respect. I do think we're on the forefront of a golden age. Powell needs to come to the table now and bring us meaningful rate reductions in interest rates. That's really the only last piece of the puzzle remaining. And I think that we will see it in September. And I think that the fourth quarter represents a wonderful opportunity for the United States economically. Musk, board of directors, just gave him an opportunity to be the highest paid executive ever in the world. His master plan part 4 paints a picture of Tesla, which is today has reached a peak of $1.5 trillion in market value. Today is just a little over a trillion. It's pulled back from that high that was reached a year and a half ago. But now he has presented a master plan 4, which paints a picture of a company valued at $8.5 trillion in 10 years. It will eclipse NVIDIA twofold. NVIDIA is around a little over $4 trillion today. They're trying to get to $4.5 trillion next year. Musk has presented a plan to get to $8.5 trillion. It's a combination of the electric car, autonomy, the robo-taxi, and what Musk described will be the most significant part of Tesla, which will be the Optimus humanoid robot. We were expecting thousands of them to be unveiled in the fourth quarter of this year. That has been pushed back to the first quarter and second quarter of next year. But mark my word, the Optimus robot is coming. It has the potential to solve the labor problems in our country. Unemployment will grow as a result of the Optimus robot, but so will the likelihood of a guaranteed annual income, which has been talked about for a number of years. I think it is inevitable that will happen as the robot replaces people that do monotonous, repetitive tasks and also dangerous tasks. I think that robots will become a household staple, and that the robot will do your laundry, iron your clothing, make your bed, mow your grass. Robots, we're right on the forefront of what is going to be an explosion of robotics over the next 10 years. And Tesla will lead the charge along with other companies that are also at the forefront of robotics. There already are robots that will cook and flip a hamburger and assemble it and serve it. Right now, the costs are pretty high, but the costs are about the equivalent of what it costs to pay someone for 1 year to do that job. So I think as costs come down, it will become inevitable that restaurants and kitchens will become, that robots will become commonplace in those environments, and that we'll see a dramatic shift towards robotics across sectors of the economy. Tesla stands to benefit perhaps the most. Musk can earn $1 trillion over 10 years if he can get Tesla to an $8.5 million valuation. Part and parcel of that will be that he has to come up with a succession plan for a leader of Tesla. And there really need to be two leaders of Tesla. Musk is the chief technology officer. He also has a chairman of the board who is just a globally respected, universally respected CEO. But she is also will be aging out over the next 10 years. So part of this compensation plan is for him to develop a succession plan for the leadership of Tesla moving into the 2030s and on. And I think that we will see that forthcoming. There will be challenges along the way, but I think we are just at the beginning to see the true capacity of Tesla being unleashed over the next 10 years. The board of directors is certainly bullish and have dangled this huge, huge carrot out there for Elon Musk. Well, Hyundai in South Georgia got a big surprise this past week as dozens of ICE agents descended on Pembroke, Georgia, in the Hyundai battery plant there, and they rounded up 450 illegals. So Trump continues to deliver on his promise of deporting a significant number of illegals in this country. Logistically, I don't see how he's going to put a huge dent in it. I'm really sorry to see him targeting, or that ICE is targeting, construction. Like it or not, we need Hispanic workers among those workforces, just like Trump needs them at Mar-a-Lago to work in his club and in his restaurants, like hotels need them in operations and maintenance. And in particular, agriculture very much need foreign workers to help fill those jobs. So Trump said that he's going to target those industries, that he was going to target really the murderers, rapists, and robbers. I think he has put a real dent in that group of people. But you're talking about 20 million people that he would have to deport if he was going to deport everyone. They are asking people to self-deport. They'll give illegals a free plane ticket and $1,000 in cash and a pathway to come back into the United States if they will self-deport to their country of origin. Then they will presumably be fast-tracked to come back into the country legally. I think that that's optimistic. I think that people will look at that as a folly. They'll get deported and they'll find that it's more difficult to come back into the United States than they think. And so people are not probably going to go in droves to self-deport. But the fact of the matter is, there's not going to be a silver bullet. It's going to be a combination of a lot of factors. I think it'll be a combination of people self-deporting, a combination of ICE, and certainly a slowing, not a slowing, a complete stoppage of illegals coming into the country. That is going to be the most effective strategy to relieve the immigration problems that we've got. It's going to be a process. I don't think Trump's going to be able to complete the process in 4 years. His successor will be left with the job of completing the task. His successor may just be Trump. At least that's what Gavin Newsom continues to think. And people in Trump world are sending Gavin Newsom Trump 28 hats. Is it even possible legally that Trump could become the party's nominee in 2028? Nothing would please me more, frankly, because there's so much work to be done. And I do trust Trump to be able to do it. I do think that he's walking a high wire act, though, with these tariffs and the inevitable reactions that they're going to cause. BRICS, we've only really heard about recently, but it's been around since 2002 when Russia, China, and Brazil formed this alliance. Then Iran jumped on board. Turkey has not jumped into the deep end, but they are cozying up to the BRICS nations. And now we see India joining Putin and Xi in China, as we talked about at the top of the broadcast today. It's a real Rubik's Cube to put all this together. And, I think the United States really has become a microcosm of the world. And you look at what is going on in this country today, you've got a communist, an overt, self admitted communist. He's backtracked on that label, but his policies clearly are communistic, and his talk track espoused communist beliefs. Mondavi, how do you pronounce his name? Mudami, I believe. Um, he doesn't want to be labeled a communist, yet he wants the government to own grocery stores. He doesn't know what he's talking about because uh, John Cosmatius, who owns grocery stores in New York, and Stu Leonard, who is a successful grocer in the Northeast, will tell you that the margins are just incredibly small. They're like, to be profitable, you're looking at about a 2% margin in a grocery store. Look at Kroger. I mean, they've got a brand, they've got a national presence, and they're closing grocery stores left and right because they just can't make the numbers work. So, how does this guy think that he's going to be able to have state owned grocery stores and be able to be sustainable? He's not. The only way to be sustainable is for the taxpayers of New York to pick up the tab. And I think that when reality hits, he's going to see huge backlash against that. So you look at the Democratic Party, they range from people like John uh, Fetterman and Joe Manchin, who are the moderates in the party, all the way out to past the socialist of Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. Even Hillary Clinton, I think, is potentially a step towards moderate from the socialist of the party. But they've really lost their way, and they have become the party of radical beliefs. As we were talking about earlier, they've become enablers of criminals, and they're siding with criminals rather than law and order. And they're really becoming, and by virtue of their own dogma, they're becoming smaller and smaller in their influence, and they've become radicalized. And AOC and the squad have really pulled this party way to the left, and they're leaving a lot of people disenfranchised. Do you know that Trump is picking up people that are under 65, and he's uh, just people in droves are leaving the Democratic Party that are minorities, and they're joining MAGA. Meanwhile, MAGA has got its own problems because people over 65 are actually cooling a bit towards MAGA. And that is a shocking development, according to some pollsters that I talked to just this morning, actually, that have started to pick this up in the polls. So that's a real head scratcher, and you kind of wonder what's going on there. Um, but I think that the more moderate members of the Republican Party that we call rhinos, like McConnell, Lindsey Graham, we just don't know. He is considered to be more of a war monger than Trump is. McConnell has championed the war in the Ukraine. Trump wants to get us out of the Ukraine, yet there's a large faction in the Republican Party that just seem to like war. And I think it's coming from the industrial uh, complex that wants to fuel war. And we're finding that it's ever increasingly difficult to end the Ukraine and Russia conflict. The fact of the matter is, I just don't know where that stands right now. The national media is kind of silent on it. Trump isn't talking about it. I think he's sort of gone to a place where he's letting them just fight it out and hoping that both will become weary of the war. But they both, Putin and Zelensky, have kind of dug in. Putin is seems to be the real sticking point. He's the one who talks out of one side of his mouth but acts differently, and so that conflict continues to rage. And it's really, it seems to me, causing somewhat of a divide in the Republican Party, where you've got the hawks on one end and the doves on the other. Um, the Republicans have their share of extremists too. There are extremists in the Republican Party. They're all MAGA, but there are some divides within MAGA um, on the big issues of spending, taxation, war, and abortion. I don't know how Trump deals with it all, but you can also throw in uh, evangelicals into the mix, and it's a complicated uh, set of competing loyalties. And I think that it is a microcosm of the world right now. You know, I've said for some time now that Republicans and Democrats, the labels really have become less significant. I don't know that we're a Republican Party or a Democratic Party. It seemed to me that we're a party of conservatives versus liberals, of war versus peace, of fiscal conservatism versus spending. And it seems like those are the issues that are dividing us now more than the party labels. And I think we, at some point, maybe just need to call it for what it is. It's conservatives versus liberals, and then liberals versus fanatics that are socialist and communist. And I think the world is dividing along those lines too, to some extent. And that's where you're seeing the uh, Western world, the United States, the EU, Japan, and South Korea aligning against the BRICS nations of Russia, China, Brazil, Turkey, Iran. And then India is the wild card. I really don't think, you know, India is a democratic country, and they have a huge economy and a huge population. I really don't see the fact that India's president or prime minister, whatever we call him, showing up in the China parade as more than just messing with Trump. That's what I want to believe, because India certainly has a lot to lose with the United States in trade if they go too far to the other side. I think they're really negotiating to some degree with the United States. They hate the tariffs. They've had a free ride for way too long, and Trump is playing hardball with India, and they're saying if you buy your oil from Russia, even if you do it through proxies, you're going to be tariffed into uh, a really difficult place. That's what's being played out. We'll see how it shakes out. In the end, there's a lot more to gain by both countries finding common ground and finding a place where we can come together than becoming at odds with each other based on the economic constraints. That's where we are right now. I think it'll play out. We'll see it played out over the next 4 months. By the end of the year, I think all this will reconcile. It's to a point. I'm hopeful. I'm still hopeful that we'll get peace in the Ukraine and Russia. I'm hopeful that uh, Israel and the Palestinians will find a way to go to neutral corners and live in peace. For that to happen, Hamas has got to be extinguished. You cannot, because of your sympathies with the Palestinians, you cannot in any way side with Hamas. And that's really costing people like Candace Owens and even Tucker Carlson to some extent in trying to be sympathetic to the Palestinians. They people view that as an alignment with Hamas, and that is costing them big time. Well, we've got a good show for you today. Thank you for joining us. Stay tuned now for our first interview. Today's show is brought to you by Perfect Circle Renewable Energy, PCRenergy.com. Check them out online. They're a restaurant services company in Atlanta. They take care of the front of the house and the back of the house. They'll service your grease traps, also collect your waste vegetable oil, and help sanitize your restaurants and clean your vent hoods. They've been around now for over 15 years. They've got a very loyal customer base of hundreds of some of Atlanta's most iconic restaurants in North Georgia. Check them out. Call them up, PCRenergy.com. We come to you today on the John Fredericks Radio Network in 8 cities on 22 AM and FM radio stations, as well as CDM Media or CDM Media on their 13 digital platforms. They live stream us on their social media as well, just like we come to you on X, YouTube Live, Rumble, Getter, and Facebook Live. Check us out. You can come and join us on the live streams right there, right now. On Getter on the John Fredericks channel, you can come and interact with us with several thousand people. We'd love to have you come and join us. And while you're there, look for the John Gordon Truth page and subscribe to us. We're just a few people away from being able to live stream on Getter. If you've got the time, please go to getter.com and look for John Gordon Truth. Subscribe to our channel. It doesn't cost anything. It doesn't take but a minute. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube and X and Facebook. We'd love to have you join us on those platforms. This is The Truth. I am John Gordon. Now let's get to our next and exciting first interview. Artificial intelligence is a buzz these days. It's hard to turn on a television set and not hear someone talking about AI. Tony Holland has been in the financial services industry for 3 decades, and about a year and a half ago, he became the founder of an artificial intelligence company, and now he cannot count his money fast enough. Tony Holland, welcome to The Truth.
I don't know about that.
Well, it
I
sounds
like
like
that
it to
statement.
me.
Glad to be here, John Gordon. I'm honored and blessed to be part of your podcast and to speak to your audience. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you for joining us. So tell us about AI. Are we headed for boon or bust?
I think it's going to be a huge boom. I think there's going to be some challenges surrounding AI, just like we went through with the internet boom, the dot-com boom. I think there's going to be some challenges. I think there's going to have to be some legislation along the way. I'm not a big, I'm not big into regulations, but I do think we have to have some legislations to make sure it provides the best possible outcomes and avoid the evil aspects of, I believe, in technology. I want to focus on the good that it does.
We've already seen some of that evil. I mean, the stories are plentiful about someone calling maybe someone's mother or father and
Yes.
pretending to be in jail and to please send money. And the
Yes.
alarmed parent will send money only to learn later that the son or daughter were fine. It was just an AI engine imitating their voice and providing enough information to sound credible. We haven't even scratched the surface on the bad parts of AI yet, I
Right.
fear. How do we prevent that other than through legislation? I mean,
Yes.
laws are good, but laws are broken. So,
I think AI has gone so fast that I think a lot of the creators and the legislators have yet to catch up. There's going to be some challenges for obvious reasons because there's so many bad actors in our world.
Mm.
So I think our consumer base, whether it's the example you gave, a son that's locked up in jail and the AI agent is pretending to be the son asking the mom for money, or that you have even cases of senior citizens being taken advantage of, that they're getting a call from their doctor's office and they owe more money and want to have to satisfy a specific claim, which is unfortunate that happens. So I think consumers got to be more diligent. They're going to have to really dot their i's and cross their t's. I think there's workarounds I think that could be put into place, like for example, call your son's number, call your daughter's number, verify. I think that's going to be a big opportunity for our constituents, our clients, to make sure they're not being taken advantage of by someone that's using AI for the wrong purpose.
It really is sad. I used to sleep with my doors open and the keys in my car just
Right?
because I felt like there was a greater chance I would lock myself out of the house or lose my keys to the car. So I just lived a very carefree kind of existence.
Yes.
And I now find myself looking over my shoulder more often than I ever did before.
Right.
And when I get an email with an attachment, if I don't know the sender, it's automatically delete, delete, delete. And that's really a shame. I wish we could roll back the clock, but I don't think it's going to happen. So let's talk
No.
about the positive aspects of AI. Where do you see this taking us? I mean, where does it end up? It
Well,
almost seems like how long is the string, of in
right.
terms of what the potentials are.
Well, I think ultimately it's going to make our jobs more efficient. It's going to replace those repetitive tasks. It's going to, I think, prevent a lot of waste. I think it's going to prevent fraud and abuse, especially in the world of healthcare. And my specialty is Medicare. I think it's going to make people more efficient. The information they're receiving is going to be more accurate. It's going to be more compliant, which is a big thing, especially in Medicare. There's a lot of challenges. Every year we have new rules and regs because there's always someone out there that is violating some type of rule or regulation that's already in effect in the business. It's going to make people more effective, and I think it's going to ultimately help people do their job faster. I believe right now at the moment, I think it's only going to get better. We're at about a 2x for the average person in terms of their workflow. So I think all those are positives.
Well, for sure. I've become a real fan of Grok and Chat GPT.
Yes.
I would use Grok exclusively were it not for the fact that 50% of the time the server is too busy and I can't get my answer. And I find myself getting very frustrated.
Yeah.
Is that going to make us smarter or is it going to dumb us down? I'm conflicted on which
Yeah.
way to go. I mean, I do radio interviews and television interviews at the rate of three or four a day, and I'm billed as a political analyst. And so there are things in the news that I may not know as much about as I would like to be an informed guest. And so I just used to go to the encyclopedia and then Wikipedia, and now
Mm.
it's straight to Grok. And
Yes,
man, does it make me look smart.
it
But I
does.
just wonder, before I would have to go to the library, I'd have to check out the book, and I'd actually have to read it. And the breadth of my knowledge was a lot wider and deeper.
Right.
Now it's just like sound bites, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
where are we headed?
Yeah, and I agree. I grew up in that time of going to the library to check out a book and read it. And I think the time it's going to save is going to be huge. The typical AI platform can read over 300 to 400 pages in less than a second. So yes, I believe it's going to make us smarter. It's going to make us more efficient. It's going to bring us up to speed, I think, much more quicker. And I think the challenges we're seeing, John, to be honest with you, is that we just got to catch up. I think we have the capabilities to do whatever we put our minds to. I just think we just need time to catch up to how fast these platforms are growing. But ultimately, I think definitely going to make us smarter. Absolutely.
So do you follow Tesla and Optimus Bot?
Yes, I do follow Tesla.
And you're aware of the Optimus humanoid robot?
Yes, yes,
What do you
yes.
think? I want one.
I want one too. I think it'd be great. I think I don't know if my gardener's going to like it because I'd have to do the gardening and do the mowing the lawn and clean the pool. So I don't want to put certain people out of jobs for obvious reasons. That's one of the big things I see, John, lately is that people call me, is it going to eliminate jobs? I think it's going to create more jobs. I tell a lot of the students, because I speak to a lot of college graduates, MBA graduates, even high schoolers. They ask me tips on the futures in regards to AI and technology. I'm like, if I was a 20 something or anyone that wants to have a job change, I would definitely master AI. I would definitely master technology, and definitely I would get into coding. I mean, the average coder, John, right now coming out of school is earning over $500,000 a year. I would love to have a job like that coming out of college, wouldn't you, John?
Well, for sure. But don't you think that AI is going to start doing the coding? I mean, look at the Tesla uh, driverless car, the
Right,
autonomous car. They had
right,
300,000 lines of code that were developed over 10 years.
right,
And one day they just threw it all out the window.
right.
They said, this
Yeah,
is never going to work.
right.
So they started having the computer watch me drive and you drive, or anybody who has a
Hmm.
Tesla, 4 million cars on the road, capturing, encountering different scenarios at every turn. And the computer watched the videos and decided what is the best solution for handling a roundabout or going
Right,
through a yield sign versus a stop sign. And when do you venture through the intersection when it changes yellow versus red?
right,
And the computer sorted it all out. Now all their
right.
code has been computer generated.
Yes. Well, John, I don't know your age, sir, and
Old,
I'm
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 old.
50, I'm 55 years
You're a
old,
child.
and I've
Quit
seen
making
a
me
lot of
mad.
changes since the 70s. I remember 8-track players. Then I
Yeah.
remember
Are you
cassettes
kidding
came
me?
out.
I've got 45 singles
Oh,
that
yeah.
I collected when I was a
I
kid.
remember those too. I
And I
remember
got
those.
a bunch of vinyl albums,
Right.
including one from Otis Redding that said, to John, your friend Otis.
Well, we've had to adapt and change from when I grew up in the 70s through the 80s through the 90s. Technology has changed. So we're going to just have to adapt. There's certain jobs, as you know, have been phased out. Certain products have been phased out. No one uses pretty much an eight-track player anymore. I'm sure there's somebody in the audience that is today that still listens to 8-track, but
They weren't very
they're
reliable.
now vintage now. But
Yeah.
things have evolved and changed. And I think, yes, you're correct in that some of the coding is going to be, a lot of the coding is going to be done by the AI bots themselves, which is going to continue to adapt and change.
Well, I have to challenge you a bit on your notion that that AI is going to create jobs. You may be right, but I don't think so.
Hmm.
In was it Portland or Seattle? I think Seattle. They raised the minimum wage in the state of Washington to $15 an hour. And within about a month, there were kiosks in every McDonald's and Burger King
Yep.
taking your order. If you wanted to order a cheeseburger, that was the
Hmm.
only way you could get your cheeseburger was
All right.
to go to the kiosk. And
All
frankly,
right.
I find the kiosk pretty convenient myself once you
Yes.
get the hang of it and you've used it a couple of times, you get very familiar with it. Um, Repetitive, dangerous, monotonous jobs, I think, are on the way out the window.
Hmm.
And I don't know how those people are going to live. I mean,
All
I'm
right.
the low wage earners, I think, are the at the most risk.
Right.
But even knowledge workers are going to be replaced, I think,
Yeah.
in a lot of cases by AI. I talked
Hmm.
to my lawyer the other day, and I said, someday Grok is going to write that brief for you. And he looked at me and he said, it already does.
Oh, well, I see your point there, and I understand where you're coming from, John. But I did a talk about this about 2 weeks ago about certain jobs I believe are safe. I mean, your HVAC guys, you talked about labor jobs. There's still got to be someone that has to work on that manually. Your mechanics out there, and I think they're going to use AI, of course, to do their job better. But you still need to have a person turn that wrench. You're still going to have other jobs out there that I believe that are in those blue collar, low income wage. realm that's going to be just fine. Still, someone has to flip the burger unless they get McDonald's bots to
Well,
flip the burger.
there are already automated burger
Yeah,
flippers.
yeah,
I
oh
mean,
yeah,
there
yeah.
are restaurants right now. The problem is that that technology is very expensive. But if you're
Yes,
paying a cook 30 or $40,000 a year, you can pay for this thing in a year or two.
right.
And Elon Musk says that we're headed into an age of abundance.
Yes.
And I just don't know where the money is going to come from. You know, there was talk a couple of years ago of a guaranteed annual wage for all living Americans. I think it's later than we think in terms of that becoming a reality with the advent of robotics and artificial
Mhm.
intelligence.
Right. Right.
Just me.
Yes. At a point I'd like to note, John, you made some very good points, and as we've come along, even in the times that I've been in business the last 3 decades, I've seen advancements in technology, and I've seen people concerned about jobs being replaced, and we've done just fine. I believe we'll adapt and change for the better and for a better future. Uh, Recent reports from Microsoft that 60%, 66% of CEOs are seeing tangible results from utilizing AI at this moment. And I believe that's going to ultimately create more profits for companies, where companies can then reinvest into other technologies and also reinvest into their people. Someone's job they had today may be different 3 to 5 years from now. I told my staff that in terms of how we're using AI in my industry, you're just going to have to adapt and change and learn new skills, but you'll always, if you want, still have a job.
Yeah, I saw a really interesting interview just this morning actually with Elon, and he was commenting on the fact that the universe is most likely 4.5 to 5 billion years old. Yet the first written word was only 5,000 years ago. When you think about that, that is, I mean, he did the math. I'm not that good at math, but he said that's like a millionth of the time since the earth began or the world began. And you look at the advances that have been made really in the last 100 years. I literally remember going to my relative's home. They lived in the country in Ohio and they had an outhouse. Now, that was a long time ago for me,
Uh,
but it was a nanosecond in the big picture of time. And you consider the advancements that have been made in travel and communications and printing. I mean, my gosh, it's just mind-boggling. And now the age of the technology age is upon us. I think it's going to be really interesting. I just hope I'm here long enough to reap the benefits of some of this stuff.
yeah,
I'm what's known as an early adapter, so I'm really
yeah,
excited and enthused about it. But to your point, it is important that we get it right.
yeah. I will tell you something funny, John. You talk about outhouses. I remember those back in the day, and when you had to go outside at my great grandmother's house and pump the water to get water out. I
Oh, for
remember those
sure.
days.
I used to tell my salesmen that sales is like pumping water from a well, and they were like,
Yeah,
"What?" So yeah, you know, you pump the well, you pump, and you hear the water gurgling up to the top, and then once it
yeah,
flows, it's just easy to keep
yeah,
water flowing.
yeah, yeah.
And they didn't understand the
Yeah.
analogy at all.
I I agree, and it's like you talked about the outhouse. I bought my place in Miami. I have what's called smart toilets
Hmm.
that actually know the temperature of what you want your seat to be.
Yeah,
When you're done and ready to flush, it actually will play music or whatever you want it to do. It actually can do workflow for you while you're on the toilet. Pretty impressive stuff. So we've come a long way since the old outhouses.
it's crazy. Well,
Yeah, and
thank
you
you,
remember
Tony
before they
Holland,
had toilet paper, they used corn on the cob. Used corn on the cob. So back in the day, they used to have a bucket with the old corn on the cob, and they would use that for their toilet paper back in the day. So
I think millennials would say TMI.
I agree. I agree.
Thank you,
But
Tony
hey,
Holland. I
hey,
appreciate you
we
coming on the
functioned
truth
back
today.
then. We functioned back then, and look where we are today. We got
Yeah,
smart
yeah,
toys that talk to you.
absolutely. It is a bewilderment. But I do appreciate your coming on and providing your insights.
Thank you, sir.
Wish you a very happy Labor Day weekend.
Yes, sir. You as well. God bless you and appreciate and honored to be on your podcast, sir. Have a blessed day, John.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Bye bye.
Russia, 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 and the Epstein Files dominate the news these days. They sound like very different stories. But Jeff Gilson, who is a lawyer, author, political strategist, he knew Maggie Thatcher very well. He's here with us, and Jeff thinks that they're the same story with just two different captions. Is that right, Jeff?
Pretty much, John, yes, it is. And before we get talking about this, I think it's important to say one thing, particularly after all the press conferences yesterday. I'm going to be speaking in fairly objective terms about what I've been observing for the last 30 years. And it's going to sound a little cold and heartless. It's not meant to. What Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell have been accused of doing is awful. It's reprehensible.
Reprehensible. I mean,
Reprehensible.
I, I'm I fashioned myself as a Reagan Republican with
Hmm.
a strong libertarian slant. But
Yes,
so what someone does in their personal lives is really not of interest to me. But when someone takes advantage of a defenseless child, it is
yes,
reprehensible, it is inexcusable, and there is no justification, including our own country's national security, which we'll talk
yes.
about. But go ahead, I interrupted.
No, 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 no. Hey, John, it's your show. You're allowed to interrupt. Um,
All
but
right, I take full license.
what I want to say is, of course, that's reprehensible, and we all feel for them, and it's wrong and it's abusive. But my point is from my own observations in the last 30 years. And I've got to say, I'm very surprised I'm on your show even saying this because I didn't think it would come to light. Is that behind the Epstein scandal, behind the Russiagate scandal, and other machinations in Washington and globally at the moment, there are other covert agendas, and they are perhaps more impactful on national security and on your ordinary listener, your ordinary viewer, than they realize. And if we, I'm trying to find a sensitive way of saying this. If we are sidetracked by the sensation of the scandal, the obvious sensation, we may miss the deeper covert agendas at play. There are definitely power plays going on in Washington at the moment and around the globe, but they're not the power plays that we think they are. They, all of them, in my opinion, and in my book, trace back to the 80s and then carry forward through association with various names and entities and money trails. And most of what is going on by way of power play in Washington at the moment is nefarious covert operators protecting money and protecting networks. And that's basically what's happening with Epstein and Russiagate.
Well, I share your perspective, and a repetitive theme on this program is talking about the deep state that one of our listeners, who I communicate with regularly and have a great deal of respect for, he's a very bright guy, and he gives me his perspectives on things that help uh, fashion my perspectives. But he calls it the secret state.
Yes,
So you and I share the same perspective, and I've been giving a lot of thought to this recently and analogizing it to other organizations that I've been involved with as a board member. And I've always been somewhat taken aback by the fact that the staff seems to have a disproportionate influence in the outcome of issues than the constituents that we're supposed to serve and the board that is supposed to set the policy. And I think we're seeing that played out in our own federal government right now, where the staff who are supposed to implement the policy is determined by the politicians have seized power and they want to determine the outcome of and the influence of policy rather than the implementation. Have I got that wrong, or
no, no, it's interesting. I mean, I'm going to come back to the secret state point because I think your friend is absolutely right. we're missing the point just calling it the deep state. I think it is the secret state. And
Yeah.
if you have, call them what you like, public servants, civil servants, appointees, whatever, who are committed to serving the public, that's fine. That's great, provided they don't develop their own agenda. And particularly if that agenda happens to be a covert and insidious and even criminal agenda, which is what I'm alleging with Epstein and Russiagate. It's not just deep state actors, it's covert, corrupt actors. But just dealing with your one point, and I think you would appreciate this as a lawyer. I've been interested in the US Constitution since I was living in England. I'm in fact American, but I was born and raised in England. Since Jimmy Carter was running for president back in 1976.
I knew Jimmy Carter. I knew Jimmy Carter reasonably well. I knew his wife even better. That they were really fine people.
They were.
Jimmy Carter was inept as a president. Sorry, he was dealt some bad cards, by the way, but
Yeah.
his response was not effective.
Yeah. And so I've been interested since then. And the US Constitution is a fascinating instrument, unfortunately full of a lot of holes and whatever. But one of the things that I have been studying is the fact that there is very little, nothing in the Constitution, very little in the Constitution about public employees, other than the fact that the Senate has to confirm some of them. But by and large, public administration at the federal level has been designed by the president over the years, and it has developed a life of its own, particularly due to presidents like Woodrow Wilson, who basically said public administration is far too important not to be on its own. It should train itself, it should discipline itself, and it should be left alone. And I think he is the father of the modern deep state, and it's wrong. I just I've gone back to college late in life, and I've just finished an MPA at Clemson, and I found myself regularly arguing with sort of left-wing public administrators in class, saying, "Well, they'll say, what do you want?" And I said, "Well, I actually think you should go pretty much all the way down the chain, and everybody in public administration should be on contract, and every senior public administrator should be politically appointed, not necessarily by the president, but by the people. Because when you have a new administration, they deserve a public administration which presents itself as being available to implement the policy of the elected officials. They're not supposed to have their own agenda." Well, this caused fury amongst my fellow students who said that we join public administration because we care. Good. And we have our own political views. No, no, you don't. Not in your job, you don't. Your only political view in your job is to implement the agenda of the person who was elected as with oversight over you. And there are a lot of public servants in federal and state employee who don't agree with that.
Well, there are 4 million of them, and
Yeah.
a light bulb just kind of went off in my brain as you were talking. I think you have identified a core problem with our federal government, and that is that you take the President of the United States Congress, and the Supreme Court of the United States. Each of them have guardrails. There are
Yes.
bounds to which they cannot cross, and that those guardrails are defined in the United States Constitution.
Yes.
Show me the guardrails that apply to the bureaucracy. There are
Yeah.
none,
There are none. No.
and they've adopted their own code. And their mantra is, "You're here for 4 years. We were here before you came. We'll be here
Yeah.
after you leave. We're in charge." And
Yes.
there's nothing right now to prevent them from doing so. So I think you just hit the nail on the head. And we need guardrails for the bureaucracy.
Now, that having been said, and as I mentioned earlier, I think your friend is absolutely right to call it the secret state. What I believe is playing out, especially at the moment, and it's been since Donald Trump came on the federal scene 10 years ago, is covert agendas. I'll start off briefly, and then if you want to ask questions, you can. Basically, it goes back to the 80s and especially to London. I found out about this. I was minding my own business living outside of London with a friend called Hugh Simmons. We were both trying to become members of parliament under Margaret Thatcher. We knew her and had written speeches for her, but we wanted to become members of parliament. All of a sudden, he turns up dead in the woods in November 1988. I didn't understand. Everybody else just wrote it off, but it didn't make any sense to me. $7 million was missing from his law firm's account. I had nothing to do with it, but it didn't make any sense at all. The money was never traced, it just disappeared. I started asking John all the right questions in all the wrong places, discovered that he was a senior officer in British intelligence, had been involved with Margaret Thatcher in that respect also. And in the 80s, there was this major war between Iran and Iraq. They couldn't buy weapons legally. The United Nations had sanctioned that. They had to buy weapons illegally, 80 billion for Iran, 60 billion for Iraq. And according to sources for my book, come from Israeli intelligence and British intelligence, during that decade, Western intelligence agencies, including Israel's intelligence agencies, became corrupt. There was billions of dollars to be made selling arms illegally in the Middle East. And Western intelligence agencies became corrupted. And that corruption has followed through the 80s, the 90s, into the North through the war on terror to where we are now. And what we're seeing is people protecting those networks and protecting that money um, in these power plays that are going on at the moment. I can explain how, but I should. I think it's a good moment to say, okay, so John's got this nice English chappie. What on earth does he know about power plays in Washington? It goes back to the 80s. If you follow it forward, and I can explain how, I know a bit about it.
I'm not sure that it doesn't go back beyond the 80s, though. Harry Truman, who created the CIA, warned
Yes,
Eisenhower that it had gotten too big, too powerful, and that they were operating outside the margins. Eisenhower told Kennedy that he wanted to tame the CIA. Kennedy tried to tame the CIA, saying that just very publicly that he was going to bust it into 1,000 pieces and
yes,
spread its parts from the Pacific to the Atlantic. And we know what happened to him a short 6 months later. Nixon tried to confront the CIA. He had a contentious conversation with Richard Helms in the Oval Office. Things got very heated, and Nixon looked at Richard Helms and said, "Well, I think I know who killed Jack." A short 6 months later, he was facing impeachment and resigned. I think that my perception is that, and I don't think it's just the CIA. My understanding is there are 35 distinct intelligence agencies within the United States government, if you include Army intelligence, naval intelligence, and NSA, and it just goes on, that the intelligence community in this nation have seized power. I think they maintain power through blackmail and outright corruption and payments to people. I had a respected national Washington correspondent tell me that they think that if they could count more than 11 true, honest brokers in Congress, that it would be a miracle. That is shocking to me.
I think, John, you're absolutely right. I will be very honest with you. Sometimes I have to be very careful how far I go on a show because I don't want to be painted as a nut job. But
I'm just,
you're absolutely
I worry about that too, but I've just
no,
resigned to the fact that I'm going to be a truth job.
no, absolutely excellent. And I mean, I find myself in friendly company. I find myself in friendly company, so I can agree with this and say yes. I believe personally the CIA was set up with a covert agenda to maintain influence of America in the world, and it was not set up to serve the president. It was set up with its own agenda, and it has sought to suborn the presidency over the years to make it to control it. And absolutely. What my information from the 80s is that then became also a money making undertaking because of the war. Same thing with British intelligence. British intelligence old and stayed until the troubles in Northern Ireland in the 70s, when the intelligence agencies and military services in Northern Ireland decided that the politicians in Great Britain, most of whom were socialist at the time in charge of the government, did not know what they were doing. So they decided they could become involved in politics. And they were very much behind the rise of Margaret Thatcher. And she gave them free rein in the 80s. And in addition to operating more freely, they also wanted to make money. And this was one of the sources in my book is a Israeli intelligence agent's officer called Ari Ben Menashe. Some dispute over whether he's former or current. I think he's still current. I think he's acting covertly. And he put it very simply to me. He said, Jeff, we keep talking and you keep asking me for information. You keep trying to paint all of this in terms of intelligence and politics. It was much more nefarious in the 80s. In the 80s, what he said, all of us were interested in addition to doing jobs for our country, was making money. And that's when the corruption set in. So you're absolutely right about the CIA having power before that. But I think it was the corruption. So how on earth does this relate to Epstein and Russiagate? And again, I want to make the point. We must not lose sight of how awful and reprehensible was Epstein's activity with regards to sexual activities. But actually, Epstein's importance was in arms dealing and money laundering. And those are the two issues that came out of the 80s. And Ari, in another book in 2019, revealed that Epstein had gone to London in the 80s, engaging in many of the same activities that the subject of my book, Hugh Simmons, was engaged in. Not the sexual activities, but he went to London, not then as a rich young man, but as a young man, an ambitious young man. And he met with a gentleman called Douglas Leese, who was a British millionaire, heavily involved in arms dealing and operating under Margaret Thatcher covertly as well. And they were trying to sell arms to Iran. They needed to launder the money back into various places and into the pockets of senior British conservative politicians, intelligence agencies, and so on. And Epstein was involved with that. Through Douglas Leese, he met Robert Maxwell. And Robert Maxwell is far more important than Ghislaine Maxwell. Ghislaine Maxwell was seedy. Robert Maxwell, her father, was the man with his finger on the pulse as far as arms dealing and money laundering is concerned. And it was through Douglas Leese that Epstein met Robert Maxwell, and through Robert Maxwell, he met Ari Ben Menashe. Ari Ben Menashe recruited Hugh Simmons, the subject of my book, my friend, to operate the money laundering. Money laundering is a fairly sensitive and complex undertaking. It's not just taking some money and running it through a laundry. It's actually kind of complicated. Hugh was a solicitor with a City of London firm of lawyers who specialized. They didn't call it money laundering. They called it money management and tax avoidance. It was nice and clean. But that's what he had. That was his skill, and he lent those skills to these groups of people in London in the 80s, dealing with arms and laundering money. My understanding, what I'm told, is that Hugh got his finger in too many pies, so he ended up dead in the woods. Robert Maxwell also got his finger into too many pies, and he ended up dead in the Mediterranean in 1991. Before he died in London, Robert Maxwell, it is reputed, this is what I've been told, this is research, and it's coming to light now. Robert Maxwell was introduced to Donald Trump. Donald Trump was having trouble with money and his real estate in New York at the time. And there are allegations that he took over Robert Maxwell's money laundering activities, and his organizations may have been involved in money laundering into New York. I say may because I want to be very careful about the politics here. I don't mind telling you, John, I didn't vote for Donald Trump, but that's not the issue here. The issue is what is going on. And it gets a bit murky after that. But definitely there are allegations that Donald Trump was also involved in money laundering. This money laundering was primarily the money from the illegal arms sales was going into Eastern Europe, with the leaders of whom Robert Maxwell had good contacts. He was a British media billionaire. Communist countries needed to deal with the West. They dealt through Robert Maxwell. In addition to getting money into Eastern Europe, towards the end of the 80s as communism was collapsing, Robert Maxwell was helping to get money out of Eastern Europe and out of Russia as their leaders asset stripped their failing economies. This was done in conjunction with the Russian mob, who was led and is still led by a gentleman called Semyon Mogilevich, which is spelled Mogilevich. Semyon was laundering money for Robert Maxwell in conjunction with Hugh Simmons. He was laundering money into Eastern Europe, out of Eastern Europe, and also when Putin took over, he started laundering money for Vladimir Putin, who was apparently asset stripped Russia to the extent of about $70 billion in frozen assets. So if you look at Epstein and you look at his activities in New York, and when he came to New York, he is reputed to have continued operating for the Russian mob in laundering, you find that. As far as Russiagate and Vladimir Putin is concerned, Russiagate wasn't about Vladimir Putin trying to suborn Donald Trump. There is very little information that Donald Trump was suborned by Vladimir Putin in 2016. Let me say, I don't vote for Donald Trump. I'd love to be able to say that's not the case, but there's no evidence that he was suborned by Vladimir Putin. What Putin was doing was he sent agents to Washington in 2016, attempting to suborn any politician, including Donald Trump, including Hillary Clinton and other congresspeople. There's more evidence that Hillary Clinton bought into Putin than Donald Trump. And so what was Putin up to? Putin was trying to gain favor with American politicians in 2016 to have them repeal legislation that might have frozen his assets. That's what Russiagate was about. So if you look at Russiagate very closely, you'll find that as well. So the obvious question arises, if both political parties are corrupted by money laundering, arms, covert agendas, and both of them become visible if you look too closely at Epstein and too closely at Russiagate, why on earth is either party making an issue of it? And the interesting thing is that if you observe what's happened over the last 10 years, actually, what most of the leaders have done in the last 10 years is pulled their punches. Bob Mueller, when he conducted his special counsel investigation, didn't have a conclusion. He didn't say that Donald Trump had done anything wrong. He pulled his punches. Bob Mueller in the noughts reputedly had started an investigation into Donald Trump's money laundering, but it never came to light. When Donald Trump became president, there was activity by Mueller and law enforcement and intelligence agents to try and undermine Donald Trump. It's there. I say this as a Democrat. There was an attempt by intelligence and law enforcement agencies to undermine Donald Trump. But what they never did was they never reeled any evidence about the money laundering. Everyone was pulling their punches until recently. What happened? This is where it's less about covert agendas, John, and it's more about human behavior. Think of a playground fight between two friends. They're friends and they have an argument about. There's always a little bit of tension between friends, and they start a fight. At first, it's pushing, then it's slapping, then it's punching, and then somebody reaches for an iron bar. I overstate the case, and a teacher intervenes and says, "Guys, what are you doing? What are you doing?" And I think that's what's happening in Washington at the moment. The Democrats have been, and I speak as one, sidelined by Trump. Trump is proving to be a very consequential and successful president in terms of implementing his agenda. He owns Washington, and the Democrats have nowhere to turn. So along comes this Epstein scandal, and they jump on board like it's a bandwagon. But aren't they concerned that perhaps revealing these so-called Epstein files might not shine light on Clinton and other Democrats like John Podesta and so on? When you're in that playground fight, I don't think you're thinking too clearly. Donald Trump responds to Tulsi Gabbard and looking into Russiagate, but might that not lead to Putin laundering money, Donald Trump laundering money, if those allegations are true?
Well,
yes, but at the moment, I think they're throwing so much mud, they don't mind where it lands.
well, you do get the prize for being the first person that I've talked to, heard, read that has alleged that Donald Trump was engaged in arms sales or money laundering. Now, I'm open to the possibility. I'm open to receiving information about it. I think that your thesis is contradicted by your own words in that if there was any evidence of what you're alleging, I think that the Democrats and the intelligence community would have hit Donald Trump with it broadsided. And we haven't heard a smattering of that. So,
No,
like I said,
John,
I'm open to receiving information about that. But my instinct is to knee jerk reject that. But I will tell you what I do think. Now, I've heard your hypothesis, and I'm like I said, I'm willing to go down that rabbit hole with you. What I want to believe, and I am clouded by my bias. I did vote for Donald Trump in 2016, by the way. I
Yes.
actually predicted to a friend of mine who was Mitt Romney's biggest donor that Donald Trump would win the 2016 election. We bickered about it for 30 minutes. A year later, he said, "Oh, I saw Donald Trump's election coming from a year ago." I said, "No, you
Yeah.
really didn't, because we argued about it."
No.
Anyway, so what I do believe is that Donald Trump definitely has some rough edges about him.
Yes.
I don't think that he is a saint, but what I do observe is that he has raised very fine children, that
Yes.
he does not drink, he does not take any substances. In fact, he hates recreational drugs and despises people that do them. He went to Epstein's house in Palm Beach. They were walking distance from one another. He saw the pool filled with young women, and he said that's really creepy. At first, he said, "Isn't that nice that Epstein will let his neighbors come and use his pool?" And then something triggered his instincts, and he said, "This is really something's off here." He went back to Mar-a-Lago and kicked Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago and prohibited him from ever coming back. I think there are more indicia of Donald Trump's goodness than there are indications of his badness, other than his weakness for women. But he also, I don't think, well, I don't know. That's a subject that's a different hole, that pigeonhole that I just sort of, I don't know.
You've been very fair. I mean, I'm still here. You didn't turn me off.
What I hope and what I believe we are seeing is perhaps, when I'm mad at somebody, I just go at them. I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
I'll meet you on the playground. Let's settle
Yes.
this. Donald
Yeah.
Trump is much smarter than I am. I think right now he is not running through the intelligence community. I think he's running around them. And I think that Tulsi Gabbard is his star quarterback right now. And what I believe he is going to do, I hope he's going to do, is dismantle the secret state, the deep state, one brick at a time. I think chapter one is Russia, Russia, Russia. I believe we're beginning to see just little smatterings of unraveling the 2020 election. I think we're going to get some bombshell news pretty soon in Georgia. I'm pretty sure that people are looking very closely at Fonnie Willis and Bill Barr. I think they are looking at the absentee ballots from 2020 are still, so they're supposed to be still in the English Avenue warehouse, where they are under court order, a protective order, and a judge ordered those ballots be unsealed and provide them for inspection. That has not happened yet. I think the Justice Department is very aware of that order. I'm hopeful that we will see some movement pretty soon on that. I think that is going to be chapter two in the unraveling of the secret state, the deep state, if you will. And I think and hope that chapter three of the book is going to be an expose and a revelation on what actually happened in Butler, Pennsylvania on July the 13th, 2024. And it is long overdue. We don't have any of the answers yet. I think that when the American people then see the collection, the expose of the demonic state of the secret state, Russia, 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 2020 election, and the Butler attempted assassination, they are going to revolt, and um, their righteousness is going to come to the forefront, and we might have a chance of getting this country back on the right track.
I think that's fair. It's very difficult. I have been asked more than once about um, my investigations, and they've lasted for 30 years, and most of them are first-hand accounts. I'm just not just taken from books and so on. Have said to me, "Do you have any proof?" And I said, "Well, wow. Let me just go out inside and check on the street to see if there's somebody selling bank statements on the corner." There's very little proof for any of this, and it is very difficult when someone says, well, okay, so you say that these things, this money laundering was going on. And I have to say, when I say there are allegations that Donald Trump was money laundering, there are allegations that all sorts of people were involved in this. And if you read my book, you will see that there are all sorts of people right up to the current day with the British Labour government of Keir Starmer. Let me just give you an example. Um, Back in the 80s, not just the British Conservative Party, but the British Labour Party were involved in selling arms to Iran and Iraq. That is my information. The arms bagman, the money bagman for the Labour Party was a gentleman by the name of Peter Mandelson, who was a major lieutenant for Tony Blair. And you say, okay, well, that was decades ago, we're like 9 prime ministers further on, except that Keir Starmer, the current Labour Prime Minister, has just appointed now Lord Mandelson, Peter Mandelson, to be his ambassador in Washington. That doesn't mean there's a connection, but the players have still carried forward. But even in England, there has. So coming back to Donald Trump is one of many people about whom these allegations have been made. All I can say to you is read the book. I use my Facebook under the name Jeff Gilson as my blog. I invite people to read, and I'm totally open to people saying, don't believe it. Make up your own mind. That's something I think the American public has got to start doing. Stop following its own galleries. Stop believing what other people tell them. Find out for yourself. Doesn't matter what source you use for news or what source you use for information. Look at the bias of the people concerned. Make up your own mind from the information available. So if people don't want to believe what I say, that's fine. I'm not fussed. But that is my information. That is arms laundering and arms dealing and money laundering as covert agendas, and that many people have been involved in this corruption. There are 2 points of view that are advanced about Donald Trump, and I don't fall on either side. I have information going both ways. One is that he was involved and he's protecting. Why isn't he releasing the Epstein files? Secondly, that he's actually trying to clean out the deep state. He's actually trying to clean out the corruption. And what you're seeing is a power play by very powerful people trying to prevent themselves being cleaned out. And John, you and I between us can offer um, evidence and information to support both views. All I can do is offer the elements. I'm not entirely certain which elements are true.
Well, like I said, I'm very open to considering the possibility and receiving information about it. You're just the first person that I've heard that suggested that. But you do have a really good brain, and you are an author. You wrote a book called Maggie's Hammer, and you had to look behind the curtain in the Great Britain into the British government as a speechwriter for Margaret, uh, the Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher. And then you had your own podcast called The Real Story,
Yeah.
which was about corruption. Now,
Yes.
I wish you still were operating that. I'd be intrigued to see what you would have to say in 2025.
Well,
Where do you get your information? How do you do your research?
okay, I'll tell you this, and I think I'll tell you why I'm going to explain, just in addition to asking the question, because something that's really exercised me, and I'm absolutely certain it exercises you. I believe that you were the Trump endorsed candidate for Attorney General in Georgia. So
That's correct. That is
we're
correct.
both people, we're both individuals who care about what people think,
Yes.
and I meet a lot of people who say, one more news channel, one more news podcast. Who can I trust? Who do I believe? What's the point? Everyone's corrupt. And I say, well, not everyone is corrupt, but you have to be careful how you get information. This for me started off in 1988. I didn't go looking for any of this. I wanted to be a member of parliament, help people, raise a family, and get on with my life. Then my friend turns up dead. I start following where it's going, and I've continued following it ever since. Wrote the book and have continued to write. At first, and even to this day, most of the information I rely on is firsthand. I know it sounds crazy. If you read the book, it is kind of crazy in that regard. I would literally go and land on people's doorsteps and pick up the phone and ask. And that's how I met Ari Ben Menashe, an Israeli intelligence officer. I wrote to his publisher. That's how I met my British intelligence informant. I turned up on his doorstep in Glasgow. That's how I spoke to the manager of the branch of a bank called BNL in Atlanta, which financed most of the British arms sales to Iraq, or at least provided some of the seed funding. This bank in Atlanta, I happened to be in Atlanta. I literally rang him up. His telephone number was in the yellow pages, and I rang him up at
Well,
home. And he,
who are you talking about? I knew
I'm
about.
quoting. Oh, okay, Atlanta. Okay, I'm sorry, John. It's stupid of me. Christopher Dragul, who was the manager of the BNL branch in Atlanta, and I spoke to him and his attorney. And my information from Ari was that in addition to laundering money from arms sales for Margaret Thatcher and Robert Maxwell, my friend Hugh Simmons had specifically been organizing an arms, the sale of GEC UK, not US, GEC UK engines to Iraq for $28 million to extend the range of their Scud-B missiles. And the primary beneficiary of that deal was going to be Mark Thatcher, Margaret Thatcher's son. Very specific information. I mean, you were talking earlier about, this information doesn't seem to have come out about money laundering stuff. This was very specific information. So I literally was in Atlanta. I was working with my brother. He was based in Atlanta. I picked up the telephone book. There was Christopher Drull. I rang, spoke to his wife, and he handed me over. And he said, "Who on earth are you?" And I explained that I was trying to find out what happened to Hugh, primarily for his children, as well as from where it went. And there was this extraordinary reaction. I had this throughout, which is that as soon as you say you're trying to do something for children, people miraculously, John, spoke to me. And so Christopher said, "Yeah." I said, I told him about the deal. He said, "I remember that deal." Do you remember the name Hugh Simmons? Nope. But I specifically remember that deal. It came out of England. We issued the letter of credit. Do you have it? Speak to my lawyer. And the lawyer said, "I got 74 boxes of records in a warehouse. And you want to pay me $1,500 to have one of my assistants go and look? I'll get you the letter of credit." That's how I got my information. And if you conjure in your mind a notice board with post-it notes and little circles of activity, they got bigger and bigger and started to coalesce. After that, it's common sense. You paint a scenario. Does this make sense? No, it doesn't make sense. Do I have any way of second sourcing that? Yes. Do I have anything that lends support to what's going on? When Ari Ben-Menashe made his allegations about Epstein in London in 2019, being in London in the 80s, a lot of people rejected it. And I was able to write on my blog on Facebook and say, "I don't know. I never met Epstein. I do know Ari, not in contact with him at the moment. But what he is describing has about it the ring of truth." And you move forward, you speak to people, you research, you read books, you paint the best scenario you can. It is, however, John, necessarily all of it circumstantial. And so, getting back to the issue of Donald Trump, I have two very separate groups of post-it notes. This group over here has a number of documented reports that have been produced talking about money laundering out of Russia, possibly into real estate in New York. This other group of post-it notes says, "Look at what Donald Trump suffered in his first term at the hands of law enforcement and intelligence agencies who were hell-bent on undermining him." I wrote at the time, James Clapper and John Brennan, is it?
Yeah,
Were constantly quoted in the papers. And I would turn around to my liberal friends and say, I know enough about national security to know that whether they like their president or not, they are revealing national security secrets in order to undermine him. What is going on? That was very obvious. The whole business with Russiagate was, I'd say, a nonsense, but nonsense is too
trivial.
passive a word. And I say this about both of them. I don't think that Hillary Clinton should have been investigated during the presidential campaign, and neither should Donald Trump. Do I think Obama was behind it? Absolutely, I do. The buck stops with the president.
I think Tulsi Gabbard largely unmasked maybe the head of the snake in
Yes,
identifying Obama, Clinton, Clapper, Comey.
I have no doubt about it. So there is equally this evidence that Donald Trump is trying to clean house, and that appears to be what he's trying to do.
I think, and that I celebrate that.
You have these two conflicting possibilities. What I do think is true is there are big power plays going on in Washington. When you look immediately at Epstein and Russiagate, it doesn't make sense because they're old stories. Why would they be revived? And I say look to see if there's something else going on behind it. I don't think your average listener or viewer, and I'm not being rude, can pick up the phone tomorrow and resolve the Russiagate and Epstein scandals on their own. What they can do is this. All of these people live somewhere. There's a movie, like Body of Lies. It's called Body of Lies with Leonardo DiCaprio and Russell Crowe. I think that's his name, Russell Crowe. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie, but basically
I,
Leonardo DiCaprio is a CIA agent operating in the Lebanon, and Russell Crowe is his controller back in Washington, and you constantly see him with his earplugs in, directing what Leonardo. Where are you now? Okay, turn right. There's a satellite right above you. We're sending in the Defender missiles immediately. And no, honey, no, not that ice cream. Get the other ice cream. He's shopping. He's taking his kids to school. He's got his earphones on, but he's controlling CIA activities. Everybody lives somewhere. So if these nefarious people are living somewhere, and like my friend turning up dead in the woods, you as a listener or if you see something going on, ask questions. That's how you find out. That's how anybody finds out. Ask questions and see where it goes. If it gets frightening, stop doing it. I've been threatened. People say, why do you continue if you're threatened? I said, I'm too stupid to stop. But, ask questions because I don't think you're going to get the answer from politicians or from the media. They are, to use the word in a different context, now too corrupted. They're too bought into one side or another. But we, the people, we can. But we've got to be alert enough and brave enough to ask the questions when we see stuff going on around us that doesn't add up, because you have no idea if the person 2 houses down from you isn't actually a regional director for the CIA. You have
yeah,
no idea.
yeah. Well, you know, the CIA has its tentacles spread throughout this country. They are embedded in every media outlet in America today,
Yes,
the mainstream media. We just know that. I mean, it's not a secret. Nobody challenges it. They
no.
have also embedded themselves in every department of the federal government. And so it is a monster. So I want, look, sometimes people say, stop interrupting your guest. The problem is radio doesn't allow long form. So I got about 15 or 20 minutes left, and I want to ask you 3 or 4 questions, and
Absolutely.
let's just focus on them in kind of rapid fire succession here, if we could. Um, One is, this is kind of philosophical, and I can't get my hands around the answer really, but you know, we're not happy with the deeds of our own intelligence community. We don't trust MI6. We don't trust Mossad. We know we don't trust the KGB. But here's the thing: is it time for our country to put on our big boy pants and just realize that, you know, we can be goody two shoes and have this kind of fantasy of what we would like the world to be like? Or do we acknowledge that the world is a mean and sometimes very bad place and bad things happen? If we don't play the game, if we don't have a CIA that is willing to, I don't know, maybe create a honey trap where they lure high powered people into so that they can control them or get information from them, including foreign actors, if we're not willing to stoop to those lows, are we risking that these other players will have better intelligence, better abilities and capabilities than we will? And at the end of the day, in the long game, we lose. What do you think?
I think that's a very fair question, and it's a difficult question to answer. The word that's in my mind is realpolitik. Um, I remember during the last election, some of my liberal friends would say to me, "How on earth can you predict, as I did, that Donald Trump was going to win in 2024?" And I said, "Because I keep my ear to the ground, I read a lot, I talk to people. For some reason, John, I have this sixth sense about just being able to feel things." I said to my liberal friends, "You want to go to Walmart? If all you're going to do is go into your independent bookstore and hang out with your hoity-toity friends, and you're not actually feeling the pulse. And um, my sense in 2024, leaving aside all of the high-flown arguments one way and the other, was that ordinary people of whatever color and gender, race, whatever, looked out at the world and saw ogres in charge of other countries. Putin, Russia, Xi Jinping in China, North Korea, even people like Narendra Modi in India, and strong-willed politicians in Europe taking America for a ride. That's what they saw. They saw their jobs getting lost. They saw us getting beaten up on trade, and America no longer respected. And they said, not we want a gentleman or someone in pajamas or Jimmy Cooper coming to Washington in the White House. We want our own thug. And I'll put it like that, even if it offends your viewers and listeners. We want somebody, we want our own strongman. And I said, that's why Donald Trump is going to win. Well, this left my liberal friends speechless. You cannot view politics in that way. Yes, you can. And the American people did. And I say that neither in support of nor denigration of Donald Trump. He's a strong man. And that's what American people wanted. Same thing is true with intelligence services.
Yeah, go ahead.
You're not playing a clean game. You're
Hmm.
playing a dirty game. And here's the problem, John. I mean, I've been trying to expose corruption, and I say, well, I don't mind intelligence agencies being strong. I could say, so long as they're not corrupt. Okay, yes, I think we need to keep it under control. And yes, I think there's a chance that Donald Trump is trying to clean out corruption in the intelligence agencies, not just getting rid of people who don't support him politically. I don't think Donald Trump's ever had any trouble with people who don't support him politically. He has Tulsi Gabbard in his cabinet. He has RFK Jr. in his cabinet. He has no problem with people who are strong-willed in intelligence and don't necessarily agree with them. Marco Rubio. Um, he may well be trying to clean out the corruption, but it's difficult. If you have undertakings that you have to, if you have activities you have to undertake in the dirty world of covert intelligence activities, and you can't talk about it, and you can't get funding from Congress, how do you fund it? If not through dirty dealings and corruption. I go one step further than you in that regard. Sometimes maybe you need corruption intelligence agencies to finance the nefarious activities. Where do you draw the line? You draw the line by trusting the people you elect. That's what you have to do.
Well, and that's fine as long as the people that we elect are actually elected. And I can tell you
Yeah.
with 100% certainty that Georgia was stolen in 2020. I've seen the evidence. I've cross-examined our expert witnesses. I've talked to eyewitnesses who saw 20,000 pristine ballots, all scored identically in the State Farm Center, waiting to be
Yes.
tabulated. There's just no doubt in my mind. So if you have a duly elected president like Donald Trump, then I'm all about it. If the intelligence community decides that they want to put their own puppet into office, which is exactly what I believe happened in 2020, and I think Bill Barr was part of it. I think Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, Clapper, Comey, and Brennan were all part of it. I'm not down with that. So that's where you draw the line. And that's the line they've crossed. And I think that is what Donald Trump is going to hold them accountable for.
Yes.
I don't think that Donald Trump's trying to put a clamp on the Epstein files has anything to do with him. I don't think he's in the files. I don't think he's trying to hide anything or protect anybody. What I do think he is doing is he recognizes that it was an intelligence operation and he is trying to preserve the good parts of the intelligence community without destroying them. And I'm not saying legitimize or support what they did with Epstein, but I don't think he wants to completely wreck our intelligence community. It filled a valuable service. And if he exposes them for everything that they're worth, it may have that effect. So I think he's walking this very high wire, like Lech Walesa, who crossed the Tallulah Gorge, which is where you used to live. I think he's walking that line and he's trying to get the corruption out, but keep the legitimate activities of the intelligence community intact. What do you?
John, I'm enjoying this to and fro, and now I'm going to slightly throw back with you that your own words are actually just helped what I was saying earlier. You were
Yeah.
saying
No, I'm
if what was
supporting what
true,
you said earlier.
if what was true saying about Donald Trump is or is not true, why hasn't it come out? I think that there are politicians on both sides of the aisle in Washington who are engaged in a power play of trying to expose and maybe harming those. James Clapper and John Brennan in 2016-17 were so keen to bring down Donald Trump, they were exposing matters they should not have been exposing. I actually do believe, and I've said this to my liberal friends, one of the reasons I believe that Donald Trump is not exposing the Epstein files is because there is nefarious activity there. I think it's about money laundering and arms dealing. Maybe it's something else.
And I think it traces directly back to our intelligence community.
Yeah, I think he's taken the view and that there's some stuff that is so awful that what little trust the American people have left in their government would be undermined if it was revealed.
You and I are on the same page.
I think that, but I also think there could be said of certain Democratic leaders about why they may not have exposed the information about Trump if those allegations are true. I don't know. I think both sides are acting badly, but also to some extent, some of the actors on both sides, and Donald Trump may be one of them, realize that the information that may be exposed is so awful it would undermine Americans' trust in their own government. That is certainly what I have come across in Great Britain. I've spoken to fairly high-ranking politicians and media people in Great Britain and said, okay, I've painted this fairly coherent picture of what was going on and is still going on in Great Britain. None of you are picking it up. And one or two of them, well-known journalists, have said to me privately, the reason we haven't picked it up is this, Jeff. We know it's true. Everybody knows it's true. Everybody knows that the British body politic and its intelligence and military services were corrupted in the 80s and remain corrupted by arms dealing and money laundering. We know that. What could we possibly do? Quite aside from safety concerns, one or two have turned up dead. What are we going to do? Are we going to destroy the country because of what is now a part of its makeup? We do what we can around the edges and we try to make the country better. So I think there are people, and it may include Donald Trump, who see what may be behind Epstein and want simply to consider it. Because I agree with you in this regard. We know all that there is about Donald Trump and Epstein. Epstein, for whatever else he was doing, was a major figure in New York well before all of his reprehensible activities became public. He owned, I believe, one of the largest mansions in New York. Everybody was going to his parties.
Yeah.
Everybody was on his plane. And all of the evidence that I have seen suggests that as soon as Donald Trump found out about it, he cut him off. I was watching a video just last evening, of a panel of so-called alleged survivors. I'm not denigrating them, I'm just being careful, on NBC, not a known friend of Donald Trump. And the moderator very sensibly asked a question of the whole audience, and she was very clear. She said, do you, any of you here, have direct evidence or even second-hand information that President Donald Trump was involved in any of this activity? And the answer came back from all of them, no.
Yeah. I think you and I are pretty aligned on this, actually, Jeff. So we got pitifully short time remaining. Let me ask you, you've alluded 3 times now to your friend and I guess
Yes.
business associate who lost his life in Great Britain in the 80s. Tell us his name, and you've talked about it, but I didn't catch all of it. Just what was he engaged in, and who took him out, and for what reasons?
Okay. Hugh Simmons was my friend. He was 8 years older than me. He was my political mentor, and I worked for him in his law office as a senior employee as we were both working our way to becoming members of parliament. He was what they describe as a rising star in the 70s and 80s in the British Conservative Party. He was a speechwriter for Margaret Thatcher as I was. He was involved very heavily in what would be the equivalent of, the RNC in the British Conservative Party. He was going to be a member of Parliament. Everyone knew he was going to be a cabinet minister. He was also proving to be quite a successful lawyer and British businessman before he turned up dead. Once he turned up dead, I started asking questions.
What was his name?
Oh, sorry, Hugh Simmons.
Hugh Simmons. All right.
I started asking questions about, why he might have died. That drew me into this whole intelligence world. Once I found out he was a senior intelligence officer and I followed leads from one to the other and ended up talking with British intelligence officers and Harry Ben Menashe and other Israeli intelligence officers, and formed this picture that in the 80s there had been this corruption in British intelligence with arms dealing in Iran and Iraq and money laundering back through to the British Conservative Party and the British Labour Party, Mark Thatcher, and through the British Labour Party, which he supported Robert Maxwell, through him into Eastern Europe. And then when I went up with Ari Ben Menashe, he painted the bigger picture of not just British intelligence, but the CIA and Israeli intelligence. Your viewers may know, obviously, of Iran Contra. Oliver North was a sideshow. He
Yeah.
was responsible for about $1 billion in arms. Tens of billions of dollars were being sold. Ari was part of the group that uncovered Oliver North in Lebanon to throw him to the wolves so that Congress would look at him rather than at Ari. My friend turned up dead in the woods in November 1988. I have not been able to determine how or who or why. Ari,
How did he die? What was his cause of death?
he ostensibly died of um, gas poisoning, the exhaust in through the window. Um, there was the autopsy was signed by a gentleman who later became defense minister under John Major, which is kind of interesting. There is my British intelligence sources tell me he was murdered at the scene. Ari tells me it was British intelligence. British intelligence tell me it was Ari. And I'm still friends with
What a
Ari in this
tangled
rather
web.
curious way. What Ari ended up saying was, "You're spending too much time on this, Jeff. He had too many fingers in too many pies." At the end of the 80s, a lot of agencies were cleaning up what they'd been doing in the 80s, and there were dirty laundry lists. And your mate, he said, was on everybody's dirty laundry list. So it wasn't just that he was a friend of mine who was involved. He was actually engaged with all these characters, Robert Maxwell, Ari Ben Menashe. I have no connection to Epstein, but certainly connections to Mark and Dennis Thatcher and to Semyon Moyelevich. And that's why he died.
So you have a lot of information, and you have given us generously of your time and knowledge. Do you worry at all about being as outspoken as you are? And I mean, if it could happen to Hugh, do you worry that maybe you're on somebody's list?
Well, I would say three things, because I like to put things in three. One, I've been told not to return to Europe. Two, I've also been told that now that I do things like this, I talk about it so much that if I was to turn up face down in a canal, people would ask questions they're not asking at the moment. I mean, I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, John. There's a smile on my face. But earlier on, you very nicely said, "Oof, that's not my information. I'm having trouble believing what you're saying." You didn't put it quite like that. You were very nice about it. Well, I get that all the time. I turn up face down in a canal, people start believing. And the third thing is,
Hmm.
this all happened or
Interesting.
started to happen 37, 38 years ago. I do not get into my car without looking under it. When I come back to my apartment, I check every closet and the bathroom behind the shower curtain. I don't even think about it every time.
So I've got a journalistic brain. I just have to ask you, Jeff.
Yes.
Are you tied to any intelligence agency? Because you sure seem to pack a lot of knowledge.
No, now that is a really good question, and you are the very first person who has said that. It's on
I'm
the
not
lines of
saying that.
Jeff.
I'm
No,
asking.
no, 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 John.
Not an
You can.
implication. I just want to
It's a
know.
very fair question. You say so. You just sat here for an hour saying people have agendas and they have serious. Are you on my show with an agenda? No, I have absolutely no connection to intelligence agencies. Um, I think we both believe in God, and I believe to this extent. I was gifted a brain. Sometimes, John, I stand outside myself and say, "What is this thing? Where is it going?" And I have a brain that works tirelessly, that makes connections and creates patterns that other people don't. I'm very happy to have this brain. I'm very proud of it. Uh, I didn't make it. I didn't develop it. I was gifted it. And I have had more than one intelligence officer say to me, "How on earth do you know this?" Know what? What you just told me. Well, I have
my
my
point.
sources. I have my sources, and they say, okay, well, I'm going to give you one more piece of information, and I go to the next person. And now I've not got 7 pieces of information, I've got 8 pieces of information. Nope, this is all homegrown. I'm not affiliated to any intelligence agency. In fact, since we're getting close to the end, and I will just make this as a plea, people say, well, have you been bought off? Bought off?
No,
John, chance would be a fine
I,
thing.
I don't get that sense at all. But so, I get 2 points and then we got to go. One,
Yeah,
um, we interviewed a guy a month or so ago, and I finished the interview and I looked at Anthony, my producer, and I said, we both kind of almost simultaneously said, can you believe how full of it that guy was? And, I asked him if he was CIA, and he dodged the question,
yeah,
making me believe that he wanted me to believe that he
yes,
was CIA, and he had no
yes,
connection whatsoever. He
yes.
was just
Oh,
full of it. My second point is that, I'm on holiday right now. And my wife said, and my producer said, John, why don't you take the day off? You're out in LA to see your new grandson. You're on vacation. Why are you working? And I will tell you point blank, it's because I have loved the hour that I have spent with you. I
no, thank you.
think you might be intelligence because you're actually denying it, which almost is an admission to me. But it's not an out.
Well,
It's not.
let me put it like this: if I'm
It's
intelligence,
just a thought.
I don't have the paycheck to go with it. But I will say this, and it goes back to an earlier point about who do you believe and what do you believe. Don't believe. I say this to all of your viewers: don't believe a word I've said. Go out and prove it for yourself. If I am an example of anything, it's what an ordinary guy can find out if he asks the questions. Now, granted, I don't expect everyone to give up 30 years of their life to do it, but ask your own questions. Don't accept what I've said is true. Test it.
Well, the fact is, we talked for an hour, and I really
Yes.
only challenged you on one thing, and that is Donald Trump's money laundering uh,
Yeah.
allegation that you made. And I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying that I've never heard it before, but I'm
Yes.
open to receiving information to support or refute that speculation. So, with that, Jeff Gilson, I want to thank you for coming on. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't think you're full of it at all. Everything you have said actually has the ring of truth to it. And that probably is the reason that I really don't think that you're intelligence. But as a journalist, I really felt the need to ask.
You're the first person that's asked, and well done. And
I'm
John,
probably
thank you
one
for
of the
having me.
smartest interviewers you've ever had.
Yeah. And thank you for having me on your show. I've enjoyed it immensely as well.
Well, it's been a pleasure. A lawyer, author, and political strategist. He talks funny. That's because he's from the UK, but he sure does have a great brain. He knew Maggie Thatcher. He wrote speeches for her, and he has a book that he wrote about Ms. Thatcher called Maggie's Hammer. And you can find it where, Jeff?
It's Maggies. If you Google Maggie's Hammer and Jeff Gilson, that's Jeff spelled the British way, with a G, Geoff. You Google that, and you'll find the book.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and thank you for coming on The Truth today.
That's my pleasure, and thank you, John.